Oh my goodness, boys and girls of YouTube Street. I see you out there dancing and prancing in the digital seas. Yes, I do. I am going to share a very special thing with you today. This is an excerpt from a very important book that's getting five-star reviews on Goodreads. Um, my book, Escaping the Despondent Sea. So, what I'd like to do is I'd like to share a special excerpt titled Sucker Punched, um, which is all true stories. So let me pull this up. And here we go. Well, this was entered on June 28th of 2016. Well, I had no idea how that little loss of control was going to affect me, but after work that day, I ended up going to some other little dive of a bar on Leonard Street, Slacker's Bar. How appropriate, considering Stumpy, having just got off work for the day, had ran into me on the street and wanted to talk. So we went inside and grabbed a beer. He was in the habit of wearing a black overcoat, like he must have thought he was a warlock or something. It was the kind of coat that you see these wannabe goth kids wearing, or maybe flashers at night on the city streets of Chicago or New York City. His job was working at Louis Padno's scrapyard through a day labor company that places like these cheap screws used to undercut their regular wage expenses. Yeah. Anyway, while we were sitting there at the bar, the female bartender started giving me a bunch of crap, an attitude that was almost as big as she was. It wasn't like me to not say anything to her about being rude to a paying customer when the place was in so dire need of patrons, so I sounded her about it, explaining that the place wasn't exactly flourishing with business and that was paying customer tips, not a punching bag, which was ironic because while I was taking another sip from my mug, a punch makes contact with the side of my head, lands squarely on my ear. Yeah, right there. What kind of guy hits you in the ear anyway? Well, sparks light up in my side instantly in a blazing flash. This punch was from Stumpy, and it was a big mistake because I was still lit with a good amount of fury still residual from that morning. Maybe he got his ego bruised and I overpowered him. I didn't mean to do that to him, and I was only trying to avoid hurting the guy. I didn't want to have to hurt anyone, and I never really have before. I only wanted him to contribute or get out of my house. Or maybe he was getting back at me for throwing his friend out, or puncturing the tires of the car, or for throwing the girl's trunks out of the window. Well, upstairs or not, whatever it was, I was thankful I hadn't seriously hurt one of them or had sex with a girl for that matter. That would have only added to my serious confusion. Now, I don't like getting hit, and I don't like spilling booze, especially when at a bar with so little cash, and I hate getting wet, unless it's my idea. So when I got hit in the ear, it caused me to spill my drink on myself. I was firstly in disbelief and then feeling violated by someone who I was extending myself out to help. Then I was thrown quite rare in another fit of blinding rage. All three sensations or emotions were easy to lament: denial, violation, rage, even though it was under half of a second. Nevertheless, I reacted. Bar stools went flying as we were both heading to the floor. Next thing I knew, I'd shown him to the jukebox. Fortunately, the connection in my ear was the only one I noticed. How he fared really wasn't a concern of mine, not like getting out of the place and disappearing before the cops came as quickly as I could render him motionless. My ear soon turned black. It must have ruptured a blood vessel or something. I have no clue how long it stayed that way either, since my peripheral vision was way out of order at that time. Otherwise, I'd have ducked when I seen the sucker punch coming. The situation was efficacious because when he got home, all three were gone. Now all I had to do was rid myself of the rest of them, little did I realize at the time. Well, soon after this came a notice of eviction. Bruce's spending of the rent allocation had caught up with me, not to mention him showing up on the police radar in the area. I cannot recall how it happened, but I think it was a psychotic episode or senility thing. When the police took him off of the street, asking him where he lived and how long he lived there, he told them that he built a house and hauled it to its location with his car. Yeah, though I suspected it before, it comes out that Bruce is out of his mind. How he managed to keep it to himself this long is still a mystery, but that's mostly because he never said nothing. Yeah, all these people and the situations around them just go to show you that you cannot help those who aren't taking the initiative to help themselves. What a hard lesson to learn. Helping myself seemed to be a great difficulty, but I managed to continue finding work to finance my activities despite my many dysfunctions. What would have been smart right about then was to finance a replacement Michigan identification card because being evicted created a big bit of a problem. Why didn't I call Danny for help? No, even though I just met him, he would have helped me. But out of guilt over the situation with the lesbian girls, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was forced, or so I thought I was at the time, to rent a storage unit from a place on Leonard right next to Arnie's Bakery. Since I had discarded my photo ID, it was necessary for the girls to put their name on the paperwork. They were all too eager to take advantage of that situation, to help, of course. Heroin addicts. What a costly mistake for me that would turn out to be. We moved everything but the couch. And the couch was a gift from Bob, but most likely his wife, Cheryl. When I moved it in, it required some disassembling. It was a bit tricky for me because I had no experience with couch manufacturing and had little clue how to do it. Bruce proved to be pretty handy for this task, but that was a bitch, which a bitch, which is why I bailed on it when when it came time to move it. Jen's son, Ethan, which coincidentally is homosexual, drove us around in his little baby blue Ford Ranger until we found a place to rent a room that would charge us on a weekly basis. I think it was a condo lodge near US 131 on 20th Street. At $200 a week, it was anything but economical. Since we had the storage unit, there was plenty of room for my computer, one of many that I lost in the past 14 years. This way, I could continue to write the materials for my books that I fantasize about writing and publishing, mainly as a last will and testament to my children. The guitar I had at the time, given to me by William Zigzag Good, was claimed to have been given to him by Ted Nugent, along with a beautiful pair of black and white sculpted cowboy boots that he managed to find for me at a garage sale, all probably given to me to ensure that I would be providing the booze for a while. Yeah, that's how alcohol works. Addicts. William Good was a sad case. One night we were out on a walkabout looking for people who needed help drinking their booze. We must have not had any money because I remember walking with him to the train track crossing on Bridge Street for a nickel that was embedded in the overly tarry blacktop's asphalt. It was about 11 o'clock at night. He couldn't get the nickel up out of the tar, and with nothing to pry it with but another nickel, it remained embedded in the tar. It reminded me of the sword in a stone. I guess he wasn't the one that was meant to have it. The backup plan was to go into a bar called Our Tavern, which we did. The bar was pretty empty that particular night, all but for two couples, a lone man and the barkeeper. I remember it very well. All sitting at the bar. Must have been fairly busy recently because the tables were a bit disheveled, several having empty glasses and pitchers on them. Bill told the barkeeper that he'd clean them up in hopes that he would be rewarded for his efforts with some alcohol. He set right to gathering the glasses and pitchers, emptying the ashtrays, and pushing in the chairs as if he worked there regularly. A few of the pitchers had a little beer in them. He poured it all together and set a couple glasses down for the two of us. I could hear them quietly discussing the whole scene, a guy and his wife. Yeah, they were laughing about it. They ordered a pitcher for us. Guilt and embarrassment consumed me. For Bill, for us, but mostly for me, I guess, because I wasn't drunk enough to have no shame. It was probably because of the mixture of Bill trying to help out all the time and me having told him earlier that I had no money to buy anything to drink that day. And being his friend when he had so few, he was just trying to help me out the only way he knew how. I mentioned to the people giggling about him in his defense that he was hard to reason with and that he was drunk, and I was just trying to keep him company until his wife might let him come back to the house. It was a partial truth. This should have sunk in as a possible future for myself, but maybe I was too preoccupied with my memories of the last time, only time that I had ever been to Our Tavern to see it. I just was blinded. Bill Bolthouse and I had been called out on a service call to repair the bathroom plumbing about 10 or more years ago, which was about 20 years ago because I wrote this 10 years ago. We showed up there and went inside to the instructions of whoever took charge of the bar at that moment. The men's urinal wouldn't flush, only to spill out onto the floor every time someone tried, which, despite the mop bucket and the sign saying, "Do not use the urinal," they did. We checked every fixture in the room, inspecting the entire plumbing assemblies before we settled down for the one particular object of concern. One of the toilets liked to run on, and sure enough, the urinal was clogged. With me holding the tool tray up off of the urine-stained floor, Bill lifted the lid to the tank on the throne. He burst out laughing, only because it's always comical to find a brick in the toilet tank. It's a valiant effort to want to conserve water, absolutely, but regardless of whether or not the brick saves water, the solution is within the mechanics. The float bulb is the water tank connected to the water valve by a threaded rod. The threaded rod is made of a soft copper, but sometimes a soft steel or aluminum. whether the valve becomes on or off by the downward or upward motion of falling or rising water in the tank. If you bend the rod in the middle so that the bulb sits lower in the tank, it will shut off sooner using less water per flush. It's not rocket science or magic. The urinal, on the other hand, had an organic problem. Oh my goodness. When we yanked the urinal from the wall mounting plate, we found out why it wouldn't drain. Apparently, they drank so much beer so fast that it doesn't become digested or broken down by the body. The drain port had a collection of gelatinized residue from the beer, clogging it to the size of a quarter when it was a 2.5 inch piece of drain pipe. It looked very much like tofu, or maybe even jellyfish sewer monster, or oh, well, let's just move on. It was one of those jobs where you thought your chances of getting a disease were pretty likely. This always runs through my memory banks when I recall anything to do with our tavern, and it had to be a distracting thought that night while I was there with William, distracting me from receiving messages that were there for me to take in. Anyway, one of all things that I had with me at the Econo Lodge, which were all important to me at the time, was my computer. I cannot remember where I had gotten it from, but I do remember it did not like to work with its casing on the hard drive. It took me a while to figure it out that it quit working when I put it back on, but that's as far as I ever got with it, continuing to use it with the guts hanging out of it. I'd written on it with a black Sharpie. I only work naked. Yeah, this computer is nothing to me but a simple writing tool for focusing on writing my stories with. The only thing of value in it for me was that which I'd written. At this time in the turmoil, the events and people in my life, I clung to the idea of writing, but not for the sake of writing, for the sake of my very dear children. These writings were to express myself to them in any and every way I possibly could, to tell them how much I loved them and how much grieved over our separation. The writings were to share the things I had gone through in my duress and the strange dichotomy between wanting to die to end my pain and wanting to survive to see the day that I had them back in my life. They would serve to be my final testament and an expose of the truth of their so-called mother and the terrible thing that she'd done. So when I wasn't in an alcohol-induced stupor, I would write. Now and again, I would lament a hope that I will be reunited with those songs, stories, and morsels that I spilled out through the keys. But my perspective of realism and reality says that they're gone forever because the girls would vacate the room, taking the unused payment on the room, along with all my possessions, disappearing with the entitlement to the storage unit, all of what was left of my entire life, in my attempt to rebuild it. Of all the things I had been separated from, the one thing that I am most saddened by most was a cardboard box that had once held pads with framing nails in it, repurposed to hold every photograph I had ever been allowed to take of my children. These photos that I took, I had to beg Mindy to allow me to accumulate, since she thought nothing for a family's need for a camera other than photos. The most peculiar and significant thing about the box was the actual blood that was sprayed and splattered upon it. Human blood, evidence of the reality of my struggle to find my way back in life. Um, I hope you liked that excerpt from my very, very serious book, Escaping the Despondent Sea. Um, I wrote it 11 years ago now, 10 years ago. I published it 2 years ago. I've been sharing it for the past 12 years on Twitter. It's had almost 50,000 reads and views around the world on my blog, but I have had only 11 responses, 11 comments, 2 or 3 of my own. But it is now getting 5-star reviews recently since my broadcasting efforts on Facebook, where I do the Mad Zach Radio Show. Feel free to visit me on YouTube, on Facebook. I have lots and lots of videos on there, especially the last 54 days of my sobriety in the last week. I have some very serious fires burning that I'm throwing plenty of wood on top of, and I'm very determined to do something really important before I die in this miserable place. I'm kicking and screaming all the way out, and I hope you are too. That might be the only guy out there who's willing to support you. Mad Zach. Peace, love, and remember to care. And if you come see me, change your underwear. And yes, your damn life does matter. So gravitate towards something else that matters. And educate yourself, elevate yourself out of society. It's a choice you make. No, there's no school you need to go to. Just do it. Come and see me. You'll find something special. You bet your sweet ass.